Well, hello and welcome to this workshop for Camera Flow Pro, where we're going to be discussing exactly the issues going on here in this comment, which I do appreciate Diego for bringing this to our attention. That love the add-on, just wish it was easier to frame shots when you have them keyframed already. Would be perfect if you could preview those accurately. So we're going to go over those two things, starting with timeline scrubbing. See, a lot of us animators are used to scrubbing the timeline as we go through and adjusting keyframes. However, I built Camera Flow Pro to be more of an auto keying process and more of an automated process that you could also stack some extra keyframes on, some manual keyframing, if you will. And part of the problem with working with Blender's geometry nodes simulations is until I find a way to get caching solidified with this, you have to play back the simulation from frame one if you want accuracy. So if I were to bake a camera right now, based upon this scene that we've already set up where it's tracking and it's copying location of this rigid body physics object, if I go ahead and bake the CFP camera, it makes a copy, and it puts that copy exactly where we would expect. It puts it right on top of that camera. And in fact, it's right here. So you can see the two cameras are right on top of each other. And if I play back the animation, they should always be in sync throughout the entire simulation. And you can see there's a CFP camera. There's our baked camera. Baking is awesome. You can bake at any point and it's going to be the right synced up accuracy. But the problem is when you're scrubbing, if you scrub backwards, the simulation camera gets out of sync. And if you scrub indiscriminately quickly, it's going to skip frames and it's going to get out of sync. You see the mismatching in camera location here? This is what happens when geometry node simulations are not cached. It's reading from the raw simulation. If any frames have gotten skipped along the way, it's not going to be able to calculate the accurate camera location. So that's why you see the mismatch here. There's a great way to get around this. If you must scrub, start from frame one and always move forward and move forward slowly. And I would also recommend having a baked camera out here just as a baked dummy to check, and you can see so far they've lined up. But if I were to scrub forward quickly or even stop scrubbing like that and click indiscriminately, it kind of skips a couple of frames, and then because it's hard to, I kind of have to zoom way into my, see, it skipped a few frames. If I click out here, it's going to skip to like 28. So that is another challenge if you must scrub. So you can kind of do it if you scrub from the beginning and you scrub forward only and you scrub slowly. Then you can kind of make your adjustments. And thankfully with Camera Flow Pro's rig, you can adjust the camera rotation itself and kind of reframe the shot. And I will get to that. There's a couple of ways that once you've set up keyframes, you can still reframe your shot and have a lot of flexibility. So I'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to address more about actually playing back your animation accurately while you're still adjusting things within it. So instead of scrubbing, I recommend going to your scene settings, your output panel, and changing your FPS to something quick if you need it quick. We could change it to 60, for example. Go back to frame one and play back with spacebar. Pause it along the way, and you're going to see these cameras are perfectly lined up. The baked copy here is perfectly lined up with the simulation copy. That's great. That means the simulation has not skipped any frames. Everything is the way it's supposed to be, so we can make our adjustments with confidence that this shot is what we're going to see and this shot is what we want to adjust, whether we're adjusting the rotation of the Camera Flow Pro camera or we're adjusting it with offsets that I will show you in just a moment. Now, there's a couple of caveats to this. Number one is, if you were to just in the middle of your animation decide, hey, I want to play it back faster, and you change it, it's going to lose sync. So choose the speed you want and play back from the beginning and pause with spacebar, and you're going to see all is in sync. even if we go up to 240 frames per second, it's still in sync. It'll play back as fast as your machine can handle it. And you see mine is still at 60 frames a second. And there's other ways you can turn on, you can turn off some constraint or some other like shaders that are really heavy, and you can optimize resources that way for faster playback. I'm not going to get into that now, but I will let you know that so you can go look that up if it helps you. So next I'm going to say, once you have playback the way you like, how do you adjust your scene? How do you adjust little offsets and rotations and focus of the camera, tracking of it, after you've already set up keyframes like this? Well, in our case here, we've set up a tracking and a copy location constraint. I am also going to do an auto keying, and this is really how I built the add-on. I wanted it to be to where you could grab this controller float object and I can just pivot around like this, get a real dynamic sweeping shot that's super smooth. I'm just going to pull right out here and then pause. Okay, so we recorded that to our keyframes here. I'm going to pause it as well. I'm going to delete our baked camera and its target. Playback from frame 1. And you can see we have a really sweeping, smooth shot that we recorded with auto keying in real time. So to me, Camera Flow Pro works best as a live camera adjustment. And then you can, on top of that later on, you can do finer adjustments changing, which I will show you in just a moment. So let's say we want to change the camera angle a bit, give it some Dutch tilt. Well, the rig is built where you can select the camera and you can adjust it. So I'm going to rotate and press Y twice, or actually Z twice. Give it some mega Dutch tilt, and then press R twice after I've confirmed it, and get more stairs in the view, and let's play back and see what we got. Wow. So there's one way to do it. You can also animate your camera's rotation. All of these parameters here can be keyframed, and since we have auto keying turned on, it did set an initial keyframe. So by the end of this animation, in fact, I'm going to play back here. By the end of this animation, we could reset and put another keyframe to where we don't have Dutch tilt and the monkey is in the center of the shot. So here, rotation, I'm going to hover over that, backspace, insert keyframes. By the end of our animation, it should be no Dutch tilt, and it's centered on the monkey. Cool. So that's one way you can do it, but I'm going to delete these keyframes for now and reset the rotation and show you a couple of other ways that are much finer in their detail and control. So if you go to the Cam Flow panel, there are some offsets here, right here. And if you go to the Track Flow panel, there are also some offsets right here. XYZ coordinates, global coordinates. So the Cam Flow actually moves the camera location in global coordinates. And it, mind you, it keeps all the animation that we've already got and the relations, which is super cool because we're adjusting this after the fact very quickly with some sliders. So we can get an incredible amount of flexibility in our shots. So that's camera location offset. And you can animate these parameters. By the way, that's what these symbols here are for inserting keyframes. Plus you can right click it, insert single, or insert keyframes for all XYZ. And now if we go to our track panel, we can adjust the offsets for the aiming of the camera. So this is really great if you need finer control for where the camera's aiming and where the camera is located. And again, if you needed some Dutch tilt, you can just rotate the camera itself. And again, all of these parameters here can be animated. So this is a great way to do it in general. I would recommend the offsets because they tend to work very well even with the relations here. There is a little caveat I'm going to show you with this next method that can be very helpful or it can be detrimental to you. So what am I talking about? Well, there's these things called anchors, and I've got one for the camera and one for the tracking of the camera, and they both offset in virtual space. So I can move this way over here, and it's kept pretty well what we've done. And I say pretty well because these tend to, I'm going to clear this. I'm going to show you this one in particular is a very noticeable difference. When we move the anchor point off center of an object that's been tracked and it is still being tracked, watch what happens. I'm going to leave this window open. The focus object is orbiting around the distance, and you can feel it in the camera now because the tracker is rotating around the object. So that motion is really being exaggerated. I'm going to move it even more off center so you can look at that. Just look at how much the camera moves. It's tracking around. It's because the track point is orbiting around it. So based upon your flow speed of how quickly it's going to follow the tracker, and based upon other factors, it's going to give you that extra rotation in the camera to potentially give you more empathy, audience empathy for what's going on. The character's spinning. Well, I feel it. And good thing you're not watching in VR because that could be really disorienting. So it doesn't have to be that exaggerated, but I just did that for the illustrative purposes of it. And you could use it artistically just enough to get your shot across. The other thing is you can combine it with track flow offsets. So we've moved the point away from the monkey, but I'm going to move it back into view with the Z to compensate. And because it's still off center, as far as the anchor is concerned, we should still feel the rotation. Yep. Yeah, you still feel it. Very noticeable. All right, so that's the caveat. If you use the anchor points, they do have a little bit of interactive and a lot of interactive depending on using relations. So be careful with that. That's why they're not my go-to when doing your offsets. My go-to is the cam flow offset and the track flow offsets because they offset exactly what you'd expect even when using relations. Using the anchor points, however, you're going to get a little extra stuff in there, which can be helpful, which can be not helpful. So be aware of that. So in our case, we're going to reset these. I'm going to go to cam flow. Okay, reset. I'm going to go to here and hover over this and backspace. And now the anchor point itself needs to be reset. So I'm going to select the monkey, Shift S, cursor to selected. And then to set the anchor point directly where the cursor is, I've built this feature in here called selected to cursor. And this was especially made so that it could accurately put the anchor points where the cursor is pretty much no matter what, because the rig is complicated and there's a lot of relationships going on. If you try to move with Shift S, move one of the anchor points, selection to cursor, it moves it way off where you would not expect because it doesn't take those relationships into account. So I have created this button to take those into account. And here's our anchor track 2, selected to cursor. Boom. So now it's back on our focal point, our subject, and let's see, did we cover everything? We pretty much went over the ways to offset after you've set keyframes. We've gone over scrubbing. You know, another way to reframe your shot is simply changing the camera focal length. Here, right here in this panel, obviously you can change your lens. You can even animate that. Wow, dude. And what's really cool is you have these experimental features where you could shift the lens. That is really fun. Oops, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. Whoa, what is going on? Huh. Oh, you know what? I cleared the location of this, and now I'm going to aim and focus on this. Oh, you know what? It's because we have a keyframe on this. All right, I'm gonna delete the keyframes. Turn off auto keying. That's what did it. That's what really did it. And now we're going to put the selected cursor. All right, so now everything should behave as we expected. Sorry about that. But if you run into a similar problem, now you know how to fix it. I'm going to shift the camera with these settings here. Now be careful with these. These shiftings, I believe these are specifically for like architectural work. You can shift without bringing in the, I want to say it's parallax distortion as much. So it's great for like architectural photography and some of those effects, but you could use it artistically for other shots if you feel it's appropriate. And it seems like it's working somewhat well for what we're doing here. Although you're going to notice the lines of perspective convergence are going to be different because that's the effect that these give. These, I believe, are meant to simulate a tilt shift lens. And those have typically been used in architectural photography to get the building in shot without that converging perspective as much. It gives straighter lines, so the shot just looks, it looks better in their eyes. So that's as far as I understand that. I think we're going to go ahead and end the video here. We've covered pretty much all the ways that I can... Oh, I'm sorry, there's one more thing. The root object itself can be moved to reframe your shot, depending on how you've set other things up. There may be some unexpected things that happen, like you move the root and look how off-center it takes the anchor point from the object that you're tracking. Again, the rotation of that object is going to amplify the orbiting of the tracking around the object, so you're really going to feel that. So I would avoid this unless you know what you're doing. If you're looking for that artistic shot and that expression with the rotation, the root object can give you very quick movements to offset the animation and keep your animation off, but just offsetting the whole thing, but it still interacts with the relations. So again, cam flow and offsets for that to solve that problem. And there you have it. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that helps address this issue, and I hope that really helps you in your Camera Flow Pro creations. Feel free to comment and bring it on, because together I think we're going to make this really amazing and make even more awesome animations and continue to grow in this community together. So I appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching. See you later.